Hey, grade sevens. So this is lesson 7.5. It's on page 282, and we're going to be doing number 1 to 4. This is our answer key. So the first question says that you can use a calculator when you need to, not just to do it. Number 1 says, write the probability of each event as many different ways as you can. So as many different ways, which tells you you're going to need to probably do it as a fraction, simplified fraction, percent, and ratio. So you've got a die, that's dice, but when there's just one of them, and the numbers would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which would mean there's 6 numbers, and it's saying either roll a 3 or a 5. So how many options is that? That's 2 options. These are the options that we're looking for, also known as the favorable options. And then there's 6 options, total options that it could be. So our first fraction is 2 over 6, which if we remember our earlier unit where we're dividing by the same number on top and bottom to get an equivalent fraction, 2 can only divide by 2 and 1 to get a whole number. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and we're going to divide by the same number. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this is one of the answers I'm looking for, 1/3, the simplified fraction. 1/3 we also know is the same thing as 33.3 repeating percent. And we also know that this would be a 1 to 3 ratio. So it would also be a 2 to 6 ratio, right? So ratios are drawn the same way as fractions. It's just the number that's on top goes first and the number that's on the bottom goes second to the side. So 1A is out of 3 marks because I want the simplified fraction, the percent, and the ratio. If you didn't do that before continuing the video, make sure you do all 3 of those for all the rest of these questions. Question B, 1B says January immediately follows June. So we need to find the probability of that happening. So looking at the months of the year, you have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, and it just repeats over and over and over. But looking at this word immediately means right after. There wouldn't be any time between it. Think about if your parents asked you to do the dishes immediately. And you're like, yeah, I'll do it immediately, but then you go and sit down and play Xbox, or you decide to go play some soccer with your friends. Would you have actually done that immediately? No. Immediately means right after. So looking at June, what is the only month that comes immediately after? It's July. It's not any other month. This is an impossible event. There is no chance of it happening. There's only one possible option, and that's July. And there's no times that it's January. So it'd be 0 over 1, which we know is 0% chance, and we know that that is a 0 to 1 ratio. All right, so part C says pick an orange out of a basket that contains 2 oranges, 6 apples, and 8 peaches. How many possible outcomes would be an orange? Well, there's 2 of them. There's 2 oranges in there. Could be one or the other. That's our possible outcomes. And how many outcomes are there? Could it possibly be? Well, it would be all of these added up. 2 plus 8 is 10 plus 6 is 16. Okay, but I always want simplified fractions. What's a simplified fraction? Well, 2 can divide by 2 and so can 16. So it would be 1 over 8. That's one answer I'm looking for. And 1/8 is the same thing as 0.125, and move the decimal over twice to make it a percent. It's 12.5 exactly percent. And that means our ratio would be a 1 to 8 ratio. So that's one answer I'm looking for, that's another answer I'm looking for, and that's the other one. Some might ask, how did I get the 0.125? Well, I took 1 and divided it by 8. And I checked my answer by doing this. I did this 8 times. This 1 here, 8 times, would be an 8. And this 2, 5, these are quarters, let's say, would be 4 of these. 8 of these would make 2. So this times 8 is 8. This times 8 is two more of these. So we ended up with a 1. I didn't explain that very well. But if you followed, I hope that helps. If not, all you have to do is just divide 1 divided by 8. Any way you know how. Long division, calculator, whichever. What would the probability that the sun will set tomorrow? Well, looking at all the data we've ever had in history, the sun, it sets at the end of the day. That's what we observe. So it's pretty much a certain event, which means that the outcomes we're looking for divided by the possible outcomes would be 1 over 1 or 1. You could have wrote 1 instead of this. I'd accept that. So I'll write that in there. So you could do either of those for 1 mark, which is a 100% chance, which is a 1-to-1 ratio. Either of those. So that's out of 3. All right, question 2 says, a bag contains these granola bars, 12 apple granola bars. Those sound good. I haven't had an apple one. I want to now. I'm distracted. 12 apple granola bars, 14 peanut butter, that's what PB is, granola bars, 18 raisin granola bars, and 10 oatmeal granola bars. So it says, what's a probability of picking a peanut butter granola bar? And part B is, what's the probability of picking an apple granola bar? Now we know that there's some work that we can do with this to figure this out. So we only have to do a calculation once that will apply for both these. And that is figuring out what's the total amount of outcomes. That can be found by adding these 4 numbers up. So I'm going to do that over on the side here. I've written down the numbers, and we'll add these up. 2 plus 4 is 6, plus 8 is 14. The 4 goes here, and the 1 we carry, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 54 possible options, which we know now that for both of these questions, the bottom of our fraction is going to be 54, because that's the possible options, that's the possible outcomes. Now for peanut butter, how many are peanut butter? It's this 14 right here. For the apple, it's 12. Okay. Now looking at these numbers, we have to put this in as many options as we can. It didn't actually say to, so we could just simplify these and we'd have our answer, but I'm going to show the percent and the ratio just in case you did one of them. You could have chosen any of them. So looking, these are all even numbers, which means we can divide them by 2. So let's divide by 2. We'd end up with a 7 for 27, which are both prime numbers, so they can't divide anymore. So there's your answer. We'll divide these by 2. It's going to be a 6 for 27. Now that's a prime number, it can't divide, so that's our answer right there. I made a mistake. 27 is not a prime number. It can divide by 3. 3 times 9 is 27. And right here, that's a prime number. 7 is, so it has to stop. But 6 can divide by 3. 27 can divide by 3, so we end up with 2 over 9. All right, so looking up here for part A, 7 options out of 27 is approximately 26%. You might have gotten something a little different than this, but as long as it rounds 26, then you're right. And it's also a 7 to 27 ratio. 7 to 27 is what we say. So you just needed one of those. So it's just any one of those 3. And here, apple, we found out it was actually 2 over 9 is the final simplified fraction. So it could be this one. 2 over 9, we know it's a repeating decimal. So it's 22.2 repeated percent exactly. If you put about 22%, I'm okay with that. And it would be equal to 2 to 9 ratio. So any one of those will give you a mark. So question 2 is just 2 marks in total. Sorry about the mistake on that question. Question 3 says 250 tickets for a draw were sold, and 1 ticket drawn at random wins the prize. So we need to calculate the probability that these 3 different people, Joe, Maria, and Ivan, what the probability that they would win based on the amount of tickets that they bought. At the bottom of question 3, you'll notice it says express each probability 3 ways, which means that we're going to need to write it 3 different ways. I want the simplified fraction. I want the percent and I also want the ratio. So you need to write all three of those. Now, looking at this, we know that the bottom of our fractions is going to be the total amount of tickets that's sold, right? We know that it's the total, so it's going to be 250 on the bottom of each of these fractions to start. And then the top is just going to be how many tickets that person bought. Joe bought 1 ticket, Maria bought 10 tickets, and Ivan bought 25. Now we know that 1 can only really divide by itself to get a whole number, so we know that that's our answer. But to get my percent, I'm going to do something a little here where I'm going to change this to a number that I can round pretty easily. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to something that's a 1 with some zeros after it so that I can put it in a place. And I know that 250 times 4 is 1,000. And I know 1 times 4 is 4. So I'm going to put my 4 in my thousandth spot to get my decimal. I'm going to go 0.10ths, hundredths, thousandths. And then I'm going to move my decimal 2 over to get to my percents. And my decimal is going to be there to the left of the 4. So it's going to be 0.4%. That's my percent. There's another option for an answer, one of the 3. And then finally, my ratio is just this first one, but written this way, writing as a ratio. Okay, looking at Maria, if we think about it just for a moment, there's 10 times as many tickets here as there were here. Maria bought 10 times as many tickets as Joe, which is interesting because then we can just take all our answers here and multiply them by 10 and you'd actually get the answer. So thinking about this was 10 more, right? Now, this is not the most simplified fraction. Let's just hold up on that multiply by 10 thing right now. I'll show that at the end. Looking here, these both end with a 0, which means that we can divide both by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 250 divided by 10 is 25. So this here would be a 1/25th ratio. So that's one of the answers we're looking for. And then I'm going to make this again, get a number like up here where it's a 1 with a bunch of zeros after. I know that 25, I can multiply that by 4, and it'll give me 100. 1 times 4 is 4, so it's 4 hundredths. Let's put our 4 in our hundredth spot, and then move our decimal over twice, and we're going to be 4 decimal percent, or 4%. That's our answer, and our ratio is a 1:25 ratio. Now thinking about it, we had 0.4%. What's 10 times 0.4? Well, when we multiply by 10, it's the same as moving our decimal 1 right. That would be 4%. 10 times more tickets, 10 times more percent. And that's how that works. Okay, we have 25 times more, so we could take the 0.4 and multiply by 25, and we would get our percent, or we can do it this other way. Now looking here, 25, 25 with a 0 at the end, we could take both of these and divide by that 25. We're left with 1, and 250 divided by 25 is 10. But did you notice that this question actually asked will not win? What's the probability that Ivan with 25 tickets would not win? Which means that 1/10 is what he would win. What's left here? What would make it 10? It would be 9, right? So the probability that he would not win would be 9/10. That's the probability that he would not win. So just be careful when you're seeing questions. Make sure you don't make the mistake of not realizing that there was a not in the question. Make sure you read the whole question. 9/10 is the same thing as 90%, which is a 9-to-10 ratio. That's also out of 3. Question 3, all 3 are out of 3. All right, question 4 says that the fan has 20 felt pens in a pencil case. He has 6 blue pens, 5 red pens, 2 yellow pens, 3 green pens, 2 brown pens, 1 purple pen, and 1 orange pen. No pen, pineapple, apple pens. Than reaches into the case without looking and pulls out 1 pen. Write a ratio, fraction, and percent to describe the probability that Than picks, and then it's got these options. First one is either a yellow or a green pen. So thinking about it, it said to do ratio, fraction, and percent. So I'm going to do it in that order this time. If you didn't put it in that order, that's fine. Start with the ratio. The ratio is going to start with a 20. And it says yellow or green. Okay. He's picking 1 pen, and it could be either of these. So looking at this, green, there's 3. Yellow, there's 2. So it's going to be 2 plus 3. 2 plus 3 is 5, right? So it's going to be a 5-to-20 ratio, which is also known as divide by 5, divide by 5. It would be a 1/4 ratio. That's the answer there, which means that our fraction is 1/4. And 1/4 is 25%. Remember, a quarter is 20 cents, so 1/4 is 25%, which is our other answer there. So it's a 25% chance that they would get a yellow or a green pen. That's out of 3. Next question asks either a blue or a red pen. So let's do that same thing. It's still going to be 20. Red or a blue pen. So red is 5. Blue is 6. 5 plus 6 is 11. So it's going to be 11-to-20 ratio. 11 is a prime number, can't be simplified, so that's your answer. Our fraction would be 11/20. That's another answer. And 11/20, let's think about this. Let's multiply this to make it be a number that ends with zeros and starts with a 1. We multiply by 5, and we end up with 55/100, which is also known as 55%. That's out of 3. Finally, it says, what are the chances that it would be a colored pen? Well, looking here, blue, red, yellow, green, brown, purple, orange, those are all colors. So that would suggest that all of them would be it. If you took 6 plus 5 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1, that would equal 20. It would be all the pens. So 20-to-20, also known as 1-to-1 ratio. So what we're looking for, it would be 1/1, also known as 1. Either of those works. And that would be a 100% chance, also known as a certain event. Okay. What about gray? If you look here, is there gray? Is gray an option? No, gray is not an option. There are 0 chances of it being gray. So it's a 0-to-20 ratio, which is also known as a 0-to-1 ratio. Either of those, either or, would for one of your marks. It would also be a 0/1 or a 0 fraction, and it would be a 0%. Okay, 0, 0, 0 all the way across here because it's an impossible event. It's impossible that that would happen. So yes, 3. And then finally, purple. Looking at purple, there's only 1 purple pen. So it's going to be a 1-to-20 ratio, which is a 1/20, which is a 5% chance. How did I do that? multiplied both of these by 5, and I got a fraction that was 5 over 100. 5 hundredths, put 5 in my hundredth spot, and then turn it into percent from that decimal. And I ended up getting 5%. So that's out of 3. Which means that this assignment is out of 38 marks. There were 12 questions that were out of 3 and 2 that were out of 1. So 12 times 3 is 36, plus 2 times 1 is 36 plus 2, and that's 38. Remember, if you have any questions about this assignment, make sure you check in on my Zoom office hours and get some explanation before that quiz comes.